views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and editors and reporters and filmmakers and videographers. And this evening, we're even going to talk to a choreographer who does have a film that's out. And we're going to talk to him about that. But we're going to get started with the esteemed editor, actually technically the acting editor of the Norwood News. Let's say good evening to my good friend, Sile Moloney.
Hi, Gary. How are you doing? Good to see you.
We're just getting along like everybody else. Let's talk about in general. I mean, you're out there, you're in the streets as much as you can. I realize we can't cover things the way we normally would. Tell me a little bit in general about your assessment about how people in the North Bronx are doing as regards the pandemic.
You know, I think, Gary, that what's impacting people the most at this point, given the duration of the pandemic and for, the fact that it's going on now for so long, is really the COVID fatigue. I think the initial shock of it has maybe subsided now. There were so many unknowns at the beginning that I think now it's more so just the mental impact of being cooped up for so long. I think that's really what's troubling people.
So that's really interesting what you said. I mean, we could go through all the different issues like, the lack of food, people don't have jobs, the rent and people holding rent and all of that is of significance to a lot of people. But what you're saying is they're just tired since March of wearing the masks, of not being able to go out, not being able to live their lives normally. Certainly the schools and the question of what are you doing with your kids is a big question. And you think that's impacting people as much as anything else? I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean at all to diminish, obviously, the real effects of, the food insecurity, the fact that people are worried about their future, their employment, their health, all of that, physical health. But yeah, I just feel like one story that we covered actually recently was in relation to a lot of noise complaints, because people are actually, having so many house parties at home now because they just can't seem to cope with being, cooped up for so long. And obviously with the bars and restaurants now shut at 10 p.m., that's another issue. And then of course, I think as well, there has been so much discussion and debate about who's right with regard to the masks. And I certainly don't want to put any, false information out there. I'm going to go with the official status, but I think people, I feel like the world in general is just divided on the whole issue. And even with the rising numbers that we see now, and obviously it's getting very serious again, it's incredulous really to think that like some people are still questioning whether it's actually, a valid pandemic, or not a valid pandemic, but
Yeah, there are people we've seen it in social media, people saying it's a hoax, people and not believing the mask thing. I mean, I don't understand it. Listen, I'll make the comment. I think that if we're anticipating a problem with travel as really ratcheting up the numbers of infections, then frankly, the federal government should have stepped in, limited the travel. I don't want to say closed down the airline industry, but maybe did a better job of managing it. We saw a videotape of people traveling on lines right next to each other. That should have been managed. That should never have been permitted. But that feeds into what you're saying, this kind of disbelief, who's right, this whole, I believe it's a false notion of freedom. I mean, you don't have the freedom to go 95 miles an hour because it endangers people. Why would you have the freedom to infect other people? Anyway, let's talk about did you want to say something in response to that?
I was going to say, my mother used to always say that, there's a lot of focus on rights all of the time, but, there should be equal focus on responsibilities. And I think all you hear is, about people's rights, which are very important, but people also have the civic responsibility to do the right thing.
Every philosophy of democracy and the notion of freedom includes that. I mean, you can go all the way back to Plato and have that dialogue about the nature of freedom. You've done some writing on some interesting things. This whole notion of hotels, that people have to quarantine at home. And thank God I have not been in that circumstance, but we've all imagined if you are in that circumstance, the people you live with, the people around you, the things you touch. I mean, I don't know how you manage it. What your article says is that there's another way to handle this. Why don't we talk about that?
Right, yeah. So in conjunction with NYC Health and Hospitals, the city launched this hotel program in order to facilitate self-isolation. And there are two aspects to the program. It went into effect, it's not a recent thing, but it was a little bit tricky to find information on it. But I believe it's been ongoing for several months. And there's two aspects to the program. So the first part is isolation hotel program for those with COVID-19. And the second part is the hotel program for New Yorkers working in hospitals and other care settings. So obviously, it's self-explanatory, but the first program it says open to any New Yorker living, in New York State. However, there are eligibility requirements and people need to check, if they're
and eligibility, income requirements. I mean, are you paying rent on those things, or are you just able to get a room, so to speak? And presumably, it's handled in a way that keeps you isolated in a comfortable or semi-comfortable location.
Right, exactly. Well, you need to phone and go through the process in order to determine if you're eligible or not. So I have not done that. So I'm not sure exactly, what questions are asked, but I'm assuming that, it is linked to cost potentially. It is, however, open to not just people who have contracted COVID and need to self-isolate, but people who may not have COVID, but who are related to a family member who is perhaps vulnerable or has an underlying health condition, and they need to stay away from that person. So it allows the non-infected COVID person to stay in the hotel as well. It's a really broad, expansive program. Just to go through some of the things that it offers: it's free transfer to and from the hotels, free meals, 3 meals a day, including vegan, halal, kosher. The kids can come and stay as well if that's an issue. Social workers are on site to deal with any issues that the person may be encountering. And the televisits with a psychiatrist are also available. Regular wellness checks. They deliver your medication.
Well, listen, that's pretty good. And if you're in that circumstance, maybe it helps you a little bit. I mean, we know how difficult and frankly frightening the whole thing can be. What's your sense of business districts and how are they doing? I mean, in your catchment area, of course, there's the district, the business district in Woodlawn. There was, of course, the Jerome Gun Hill bid. There's Kingsbridge Road. Tell me a little bit about your sense. Are they doing okay? Are they somehow surviving? Is there great fear now because there's another wave coming? I mean, what's your sense of what's going on?
Well, I think that most businesses are struggling. Most small businesses certainly are struggling. And despite, the various programs that were made available, I think that it hasn't helped them to the degree that one would hope, because a lot of the time those small businesses were not eligible to participate in the various programs, be it local or city. And so I know that the Northwest Coalition,
Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, I get it.
Coalition, exactly, thank you. Yeah, they produced a very interesting report recently, which showed that very few, I think it was just 6% of small businesses in the Northwest Bronx, or in Community Board 7, I believe, had applied for grants or loans, because they needed help understanding the COVID regulations. So I think overall, and despite the best efforts of all of the business community and all of the, of course, it's not to suggest that people are not doing their best to help them, but I think it's just that it's proving difficult despite all of the different programs that are out
there. I find just in my own travels around some of the areas we talked about, that it's kind of a mixed bag. In some cases we see, like a shopping strip where, gee, all the stores are still open. And in some places you say, wow, look at that store went out of business. I used to love that place, that kind of thing. And I think there is it's hard to get a full handle on it. But I think what you said is true. I think one of the biggest issues is the technical advice on how to apply, how to make sure you get the money. There could be language issues, certainly with many Bronx business owners don't speak English or native Spanish speakers. So I think that is part of the whole thing. It will be interesting. Of course, there is not a relief bill or a stimulus bill on the table right now, but there is some word out of Washington that maybe we'll get something at some point. Who knows? Just to conclude here, what do you see as next for you and your colleagues at the Norwood News in terms of focus? And I mean, is focus going to be on the vaccines? Is that where you're looking next, or is it more of the same? I mean, just tell me where you're working at next.
Yeah, well, that will certainly be a hot topic, I think, in the next month, and then for the next 6 months, I guess. Vaccines, we heard obviously that Montefiore and Einstein College of Medicine are undergoing a vaccine trial at the moment with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I received information that 200 people were screened for that. It started around mid-November. 60 people have been enrolled. More than half are people of color and are generally over the age of 65. They started enrolling, about 2 weeks ago, around mid-November, and they don't know when to expect results as to, when it can be said if this vaccine is
if it works, yeah. But listen, there is movement. My own attitude toward it is let's be as patient as we can be. We certainly are hopeful, but let's not rush anything. We don't want any mistakes. We don't want somebody to get vaccinated and then have a problem or a worse problem, or have it not work and then they do something that they wouldn't have ordinarily done, and now all of a sudden you got a real problem. So anyway, Sile Moloney, we can't thank you enough for all the great work you do at the Norwood News. You know what my advocacy is. We need media. We need local media more than ever right now, and you're right at the forefront, and we appreciate everything you do over there at the Norwood News.
Likewise, Gary. Thank you so much. It's
been a pleasure. Folks, we're going to take a short break. You are going to really enjoy the Emmy-nominated choreographer who's got a tremendous film, a tremendous concept coming up. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community,
and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting
to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I'm real excited about this segment because we'd like to extend the boundaries. And yeah, we talk about people who are putting stuff out. We're actually talking to a choreographer who does have a film that's out. And so we'll say nice to see you, Jeremy McQueen. Nice to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I should have mentioned Emmy-nominated choreographer Jeremy McQueen. He's got the whole idea is a ballet film. It's a feature-length dance film entitled Wild. Before we even get to that, talk to me a little bit about, because it's all based on this Black Iris Project concept. Talk to me about the Black Iris Project. What is it, and why is it so very important for all of us to know about it?
Absolutely. We are a group of Black artists from various different disciplines creating original classical and contemporary ballet works that are rooted in Black history or the Black experience. Growing up studying classical ballet in a number of different institutions such as American Ballet Theater and San Francisco Ballet, I loved the art form, but I rarely had an opportunity to see my own self or my stories told on stage through ballet. So our initiative is to bring dancers together seasonally to create work that amplifies Black voices and the Black culture.
Maybe we ought to rewind even further. So what got you excited about ballet? Was it just, seeing, gee whiz, there should be an opportunity for me? Or were you a dancer even as a child? I mean, what got you really driven to do this for your life's work?
At 8 years old, my mom took me to see the national tour of the Phantom of the Opera when it came to San Diego, California, where I'm originally from. We sat on the last row of the balcony in the nosebleed section, so high up that we rented binoculars just so I could see everything a little bit better. But I sat on the balcony in the balcony with those binoculars practically glued to my face the entire time. I loved everything about the experience, from the plush red seat that I sat in to the costumes, the scenery, the dancing, the music. It just gave me chills and spoke to me in so many ways I had never experienced. So I looked at my mom after that performance and I said, I want to be a part of this. I didn't know I could make a living as an artist. I just knew that I wanted to have more of that. So my parents made a ton of financial sacrifices and investments in me to be able to pretty much try anything I wanted: dance, music, acting. And that's where I really found my love for dance start to flourish. Ballet was one of the art forms, or techniques rather, specifically within dance, that they really felt I really needed to have a strong foundation in. But as I mentioned before, I didn't always see myself. So I had a really hard time connecting with ballet, but I always have loved expressing myself through movement.
What I talk about when we talk about arts in the Bronx very often, because of the nature of the Bronx, because of the nature of the people of the Bronx, that arts is always, I don't want to say every single time, but almost always a vehicle towards something else, toward a greater good, toward a greater issue. I mean, I know who Bronx people are. We have passion about a lot of things and we're very creative. But if you're going to create that artwork and you're going to do something, very often it's driven by a social need, a need to make some real change. Talk to me about, the things that you're concerned about with New York City youth, with Bronx youth, growing up through even the juvenile justice system.
I've been teaching in New York City as a teaching artist for about the past 6 years now. And so I've had a really great experience working with youth of all different backgrounds. But particularly being able to go into communities of color and showing them the beauty of art and the healing powers of art. especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. In my neighborhood, I've seen an uptick in not only violence, but also in graffiti. And I feel that art would really help young people in particular find a way to express themselves in a very cathartic manner. And so that has been my mission specifically with Wild, is to find ways to provide young people, especially justice-involved youth, an opportunity to be able to create something artistic and to be able to see that artistry amplified on a level that they probably never thought would be possible.
I believe this is really just me talking to you as opposed to all the other people who are watching us. I really believe that the Bronx people, they get it. The systems, we know all that stuff. It doesn't work. So we find our own ways to communicate things, to solve our problems. And when I hear about someone like you who says, look, we're going to work with youth who may be detained or don't have opportunities, I get real inspired by that, because what that means is there's another level we can work on to solve problems. And I know that's exactly what you're talking about, that we can use our creativity, we can use our expression to communicate. And maybe there's a better way of doing things, right? You're with me on that? I'm guessing it's a pretty good guess, right?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I think we have to look at things at a micro level, starting with what can we do right now in our neighborhoods and our communities to help strengthen the overall structures of what we hope to see in the future. So I've always lived with that Gandhi idea of being the change that you wish to see in the world.
I can't tell you, this will make you feel good, how many people I interview who feel the same way. And that's why I do what I do. I know that's why you do what you do. All right, let's talk about Maurice Sendak and the classic children's novel, Where the Wild Things Are. My kids, I can tell you, we read it, and we read it again, and their minds were exploded. This really had made a big impression on you, didn't it? And how did it translate into Wild? I'm going to look at a trailer in just a moment, so go ahead.
Absolutely. It's one of my most favorite children's books, simply because it really harnesses one's creativity. Here we have this young boy, Max, who was sent to his bedroom essentially without supper. And even while he was in his small bedroom, he was able to dream of a world bigger than the one that he knew. And that has always been a really important message for me in my life, coming from California, taking a leap of faith 15 years ago and moving to New York, pursuing a career that I really didn't know a whole lot about what was possible for me. You know, I think that's what I'm hoping to instill in people through the use of Where the Wild Things Are as my inspiration, is being able to look beyond your circumstances and the challenges that you face and continue to dream big and create the world for yourself that you want to live in.
So now we're going to look at a trailer of Wild. It's short, frankly, for me, all too short. Apparently, the film did debut on BronxNet a little while back, which is pretty exciting for all of us. But just give a little introduction of what we're about to see and what Wild is really about.
Wild is a 4-part film that I am creating over the course of the next year. The first part was released last month, and it is entitled Overture. It's basically the introduction to the Bronx and the introduction to 3 young men, fictional young men in the Bronx, who find themselves in various situations that could get themselves entangled with the justice system. So in this first film, we get to kind of see a little bit of the Bronx and why I love the borough.
And through the medium of ballet. Let's be clear. All right, so here it is, the trailer of Wild.
Southern trees, they bear strange fruit. Blood on the leaves and blood at the root, and bitter cry.
Well, there it is. In our virtual, we don't have a studio audience, so it's just me. I will applaud. Talk about the making of this. You worked with, I'm sure, some very talented people, dancers, and certainly filmmakers. You want to shout out and credit some of them for some of the great work that they did?
Yeah, absolutely. Colton Williams is a amazing filmmaker, cinematographer that I worked with. He also worked on A Mother's Right with me in 2018, which ended up getting us nominated for a New York Emmy Award. And then I had a team of really incredible dancers, Sean Lesnick, AJ, whose name slips me at the moment, and Damon Diner.
AJ is good enough. Everybody knows him as AJ. That's fine.
All of them are featured on our website, where you can go and learn more about them and all the other amazing musical collaborators in our project.
Give us the URL for that website.
Yes, it's www.blackirisproject.org.
Now let's talk about the seeing of the film. People, I'd like to think, were motivated to see it through the trailer and through some of the discussion. How can we see it? And then, of course, we got to know, this is part one. You got some work to do. Tell us about what's coming up and when that's coming up.
Yes, you can visit our website, blackirisproject.org, to screen the film for free. The direct link is blackirisproject.org/wild. And part 2 will be coming out in March. We filmed that in February, with part 3 actually being a site-specific performance that will happen in the Bronx, hopefully for public audiences. And we'll announce that a little bit later, but that'll take place in May.
Could you just briefly talk about, I know your artwork is as a dancer, this filmmaking has been exciting for you? We only have a moment. I probably shouldn't have even, because we could talk about this forever, but it's exciting. The new medium, putting it out must be exciting.
Yeah, it's been really incredible to navigate ways that we can continue to engage and uplift audiences despite not being able to gather the way that we normally would for a performance. It's definitely pushed my boundaries in learning new challenges and learning new tools and skill sets to be able to use moving forward, but it's been an incredible learning experience.
Emmy-nominated choreographer Jeremy McQueen, thank you so much for helping make the Bronx a better place through art and dance and music and everything that we do. You're one of our heroes. We really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Great. That's all for the Bronx Buzz. We got to go. They're waving goodbye. And so we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Happy holidays. Wear your mask. Be socially distant. Do the right thing, and we'll all get through it together. Good night.